Hey everyone, Enrique here. Welcome to another review. In today's review, we're going to take a look to another movie that already had 10 years in the bank this year since it came out in 2016. Similar to what happened to Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice when we saw our two main superheroes fighting each other, this one is no exception. Only in this case, it's not just two superheroes fighting each other, is an entire team. Two factions of Avengers fighting each other in a movie called Captain America Civil War. The third installment in Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. It was also another appearance for Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. And let's be honest, this was the movie that we were all waiting for us to see. If you read the comics that were created by Brian Michael Bendis, you know that the idea of seeing your favorite heroes fighting each other for the ideologies and for everything that had stakes on was something very enticing for us as comic book fans to see. It had a lot of promises, but it also had a lot of surprises and a lot of stakes that had repercussions that were still felt into all the other Avengers movies. So, with all that being said, what's going on in this movie to make it such a memorable ride? Well, let's take a look. In one of their missions, something goes wrong, which results in all the countries, alongside Thaddeus Ross working as the secretary, to create something called the Sokovia Accords, something that keeps the Avengers on check and regulate the rules about saving people's lives. The only problem is it's creating a little bit of the distortion between the members. Matters are made worse when Team T'Chaka is killed in an explosion directed to the United Nations, resulting in his son T'Challa taking over the mantle of Black Panther and going after the person responsible, who he believes is Bucky Barnes. Now, Bucky has been on the run ever since the events of Winter Soldier, but Steve decides to help him and figure out what's going on and the person responsible for it. The only problem is that Tony, feeling responsible for all the mistakes he has done over the years, including the one that happened in Civil War, he decides to stop Steve and trying to capture Bucky in order to appease the Sokovia Accords and the United Nations. So things are split apart. Our heroes are divided, and there are now two teams fighting in order to figure out what's going on and to stop the other from going any further. It starts what we call Civil War. So, right off the bat, it's definitely a different version of Civil War from the comics, which I'm gonna get into in a moment, but let's just say that it has a different stakes that it had in the comics. For starters, the Sokovia Accords are different from, the Registration Act, which involves superheroes registering into each country to defend it, and this causes also mounting tensions between the heroes. But here, the Sokovia Accords are made because they're under the belief, or at least Thaddeus Ross is under the belief, that the Avengers cause more damage than they actually do to save it. This is something that obviously a lot of people will deny it, but they need regulations for the Avengers since mistakes lead to a lot of people getting nervous. So yeah, things got complicated, but I like the fact that it's also creating a divide in our heroes, but they say they don't want to be driven to those positions, but they feel like they have to in order to keep peace and maintain order. And that is something that puts into conflict between Steve and Tony, but not just them, but also for the rest of the team. This is not only a great story for Captain America, for to see him show his heroic side as well as trying to make compromises along the way, especially on the lights of helping his best friend Bucky, who was brainwashed by Hydra and now by this new person, this new villain. This is definitely an interesting movie. Actually, not interesting. This is a well-written movie filled with personal issues, high stakes in the Avengers, as well as a lot of consequences along the way. It's also good to see that each character gets a lot of representation and their own story. Even if it's a subplot, you can still feel the mounting tensions between our heroes and what their personal dilemmas were. Let's talk about characters. So, there are so many heroes that there are only a few villains, and in this case, I'm only gonna reduce it to one villain. So, sorry, Crossbones, aka Frank Grillo, but yeah, he was more of an antagonist and more of a snooze fest in this case. But he was a big part in the larger scheme of things. But the one villain that we can all agree was pretty much manipulating things from the start is Daniel Brühl as Zemo. Now, Zemo in the comics was a member of Hydra. He was very skilled and apparently immortal. He has lived for thousands of years ever since World War II. Actually, no thousands of years, like 100 years basically. But in this case, the Zemo of this version is a little bit different. He's a more of a quiet man, a silent killer, looking for opportunities to strike. He has caused a lot of damage in order to get information that he believes it could destroy an empire. But in this case, the empire is not a country, is not a government, it's the Avengers. Since he believes that the Avengers have to split apart because of something that happened to him. And it should be noted that Zemo in this version was a citizen from Sokovia. So yeah, there's a lot of personal issues and stakes for Zemo as well. I like the fact that you see him throughout the movie making schemes, doing a lot of horrible actions, and doing a lot of things that, well, many people consider unethical, but it comes from a real, very understandable place. I know that a lot of people don't made Zemo into a big villain throughout the entire MCU run, like he's not, a big mastermind doing a lot of incredible stuff like Thanos and Loki and all those other villains. But I like the fact that this one is more different. That this is the one that caused more damage to the Avengers that they even realized that he was a person who had a vendetta against the Avengers, but he knew that confronting him head to head wouldn't be enough. Like he needed to do something, destroy the Empire on the inside with something and information that he acquired through the Winter Soldier. So yeah, Zemo in this case is somebody that is very, very dangerous. And this is a guy who appeared in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and you can see the progression of this character. But that's something that comes to Daniel Brühl's acting, and I have to say he did a wonderful job in this particular scenario. So kudos for that. Now let's talk about the man who I wish he was here, and I'm sad that he's no longer with us. I'm of course talking about T'Challa, aka Black Panther, played by the late Chadwick Boseman. We can all agree on one thing. When it comes to Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman made this character very unique, very inspirational, and very serious. He took the mantle of a superhero who was created specifically to bring the jewel of Africa, as many people like to call it, into the world. That is something that I really enjoy in this version. And I like to see Chadwick Boseman do some great acting as this mythical superhero who has been in the comics for years and had a lot of personal stakes and a lot of action and a lot of personal characterization. It's hard for me to describe, but let's try to focus on what he does in this movie. So, in this version, T'Challa is the prince of Wakanda. His father, T'Chaka, was still the king until he was assassinated in the explosion in the United Nations conference. So, in this movie, he mixed it into his mission to apprehend or to kill the person responsible for it. And that person he believes was the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes. And he goes through anything in order to get to his goals. This version of T'Challa is a very vengeful version of the Black Panther, because he was taking his father was killed. He was taken away by him, and he was so filled with anger and rage that you don't always see it explode, but you see the determination of him getting to this person. That's what I like about Chadwick Boseman's performance here. He is like a silent killer. He doesn't get explosive in anger, but he actually goes into action. He really moves his ways. He really shows the pain and the basically the amount of carriage baggage that he has to carry now that he became the king of Wakanda, and knowing the pressure that he's going through. So he has to take the Bucky down in order to not only prove himself to the people that he can actually get things done, but also to fill the void that he was led by him. But what I like about this is that he understands also how rage consumes people and how it can destroy you in the inside. And I like to see that Chadwick, the T'Challa, is evolving from that. That this is the one that we haven't seen yet in this movie, but this was a perfect introduction for Chadwick as the character. So yeah, he was good as this Tommy Lee Jones like a chaser who wants to chase until he gets to his goal. And that's what I like about Boseman's performance. So yeah, definitely great into that department. Now let's talk about two heroes that basically didn't have screen time, but I still enjoyed their performances. I'm of course talking about Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, played by Paul Rudd, and Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, played by Jeremy Renner. So we can all agree that they didn't have much characterization. They're basically there for cameos. But I like the fact that Clint and Scott are still there helping Captain America whatever they need. In this case, Clint was retired after the events of Age of Ultron. He had a family, had a farm, and yet he decided to help Cap in this dire situation, knowing that things are gonna get worse, believing that it's going to lead to a huge disaster. But I like also to see that Clint is still charismatic and still very charming as Hawkeye. That Jeremy Renner is playing the character very well after all these years. Paul Rudd, of course, as Ant-Man, great service of comic relief, as well as giving us the great moment of seeing him at giant size. So yeah, they do little, but they do a lot of things and funny things as well. Now let's talk about characters I already talked before in previous videos. Paul Bettany as Vision and Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch. So I already talked about them in my WandaVision review all those years ago that I made in 2020. In 2021 actually. My god, time flies by fast. But regardless of that, it is good to see that this is the beginning of their relationship. Now, of course, they don't do anything like kissing or hugging or anything, but you can see the beginnings of Wanda and Vision's relationship. In this case, Wanda feels guilty not only for the events of Age of Ultron, but also from failing the mission that caused a lot of people's lives. She feels an enormous amount of guilt that she doesn't know what to do with it. And Vision is there as developing his also emotional feelings. You recall that he was created not only by Tony and of course Bruce Banner, but also by Ultron, and using the Mind Stone that gives him power and life. So in this case, he's still learning to be around people, still learning how to be more emotionally connected to Wanda. And this is more like the development of how they feel about each other, how they start to create the relationship. And yes, they are in opposite sides in this case, Vision in Tony's side and Wanda in Steve's side, but they still feel affection for each other. And they understand what the problems that they have with their powers, how they handle people. And it's great performances. It's a good introduction to see how Vision and Wanda's relationship was beginning and how it developed throughout not only this film but also the other films like Infinity War and WandaVision. So it's good to see that. Now let's talk about other characters that have more important roles. So I decided to compress them into this category. We have Emily Bankham as Sharon Carter, Martin Freeman as Everett K. Ross, and William Hurt, the late William Hurt, as Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. No relation to Everett, of course. So I put them here in this section because they have their unique perspectives. Each of them have their own viewpoints about the Avengers and their actions. All of them are variants from being with the Avengers, other against the Avengers, and someone in between. Emily as Sharon Carter, she appeared in Winter Soldier, so she has their own stakes here. But in this case, she's like the voice of conscience for Steve. That no matter the situation or how many people told you or tell you no, that she reminds Steve that yeah, sometimes you have to put your feet in the ground and make a stand. And she serves as the moral compass for our heroes and basically for Steve to do the right thing for Bucky and put him an actual perspective into the people to say that he's not the bad guy. On the other hand, we have Thaddeus Ross. We all remember him as the general that chases after the Hulk. Now that the Hulk is not in his chase list, now he's become the Secretary of Defense, and he believes that the Avengers are just too dangerous, that they need to work with the government or just stop doing what they're doing and retire. This is a guy who doesn't trust in superheroes. He doesn't trust in anybody. I already talked about him in my Brave New World review, and which was played by Harrison Ford. But let's just say that Williams here in his performance of Thaddeus, as short as it is basically the perspective of someone from the government. Obviously, we all don't like the government, and we all have our issues. But in this case, it serves like the consequences, like what happens when people don't use their powers for good or they're not left unchecked. And Thaddeus Ross serves as saying, hey, your activities can cause damage if left unchecked. Martin Freeman as Everett K. Ross is someone varying between them. Like, he doesn't do much in this film, he doesn't have a major presence, but it's good to see that despite the viewpoints that he has about Thaddeus Ross, about keeping the Avengers on check. We don't see in this movie that much, but it seems like his viewpoint is starting to change. Just a little, of course. But we wouldn't see him being fleshed out until, Black Panther movie, which was a movie that he was a part of since the character Everett K. Ross. It's a part of the Marvel Comics, and he's a part of the Black Panther movie as well. So he doesn't do much, but it's good to see that he still is somewhere in between. It's still also a funny relief as well because it's Martin Freeman, of course. Let's talk about other people that are in Cap's side. Bucky Barnes as aka Winter Soldier, played by Sebastian Stan, and Sam Wilson aka Falcon, played by Anthony Mackie. So these two are loyal friends to Steve. We can see that not only Sam is willing to help Steve whatever he needs to, being part of the Avengers now, and be willing to risk his life and his freedom in order to help Steve to save Bucky, even though he has an antagonistic relationship with him, which again, I already talked about in my Falcon and Winter Soldier review that you can check out. But it's good to see that despite his rivalry or his antagonistic relationship with Bucky, that Sam is still a loyal friend. And speaking of loyal friends, Bucky is in this version, like Jason Bourne. He doesn't remember much about his actions or his mistakes as an assassin, but he's trying his best to make amends, to make things right. But every time he tries to, the world is constantly against him. And it's good to see that despite trying to act cold and almost lonely to everyone, including Steve, that his good nature still rises up, and no matter what, he's willing to be there and be Steve's best friend. So it's good to see that, and it's good to see Sebastian's performance acting like the cold killer who wants to redeem himself, shining through. Other people who are now in Tony's side are James Rhodey Rhodes, aka War Machine, played by Don Cheadle, and Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson. So these two are in Tony's side now because they also believe that they need to be put on check. In the case of Rhodey, it's obvious because he is one of the people who work for the government. He's one of the generals, or one of the Marines, or one of the jet fighters. I can't remember the role that Rhodey had in the movies. I'm so sorry, Don. But yeah, he's still not only very loyal to the government, also very loyal to Tony as well. Because after the history, after all the ups and downs, they still believe in each other. Rhodey, it's always going to be Tony's best friend, and he also believes that, yeah, I signed the Accords on my own free will because I believe that we're doing the right thing. And that's something that it still shows in Don Cheadle's performance. He's still very loyal, but also very strict about the rules. Natasha, on the other hand, she's more loose. We all know that Natasha can be more freely and more friendly like whenever her friends, the Avengers, are around. But it's also good to see that she doesn't vary too much on the side of Tony, but also understands the side of Steve as well. Because after all, she has been undercover for so long, create a family on the Avengers, feeling like she's herself allowed to be more normal like in her own way, and she believes that she doesn't want him to be driven to this situation, but yet she understands that she has to go through it, but also tries to understand that, yeah, sometimes it's better to break the rules sometimes, and it does put him in odds with Tony as well. But it's good to see that Natasha in this version is trying to be more like the in between the guys. Like she's understanding Steve's opinion, but also understanding Tony's opinion because, of course, she doesn't want to be labeled as another, monster. And after all the years she has been as an assassin, that's saying a lot. Now let's talk about our two heroes who are in opposite sides. We all, of course, know that they have their distinct views, but let's try to break it down. Let's start with Tony, aka Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr. So we can all agree that no matter what happens in Doomsday, he's still seen as the greatest version of Iron Man, as Tony Stark, the character that redeemed the actor's career for better. And in my opinion, this is his best role known thus far. And one of the things that I like about Tony in this version is that he is still quippy, he's still very sarcastic and very funny and very charismatic. But we also see the side of Tony that is, there's something that has been lingering for a lot of years. The guilt, the remorse. Remember, this is the guy who grew up believing that he selling his weapons to the entire countries, making a profit out of it was the only thing that we know he does best. But he changed after the events of Iron Man. He became a much better hero, and after the events of Age of Ultron, believing that he needed to protect the world from other threats that were out of this world, and creating something that was very unhuman, really made Tony really guilty. And after seeing a woman losing her son to the events of Age of Ultron, it puts Tony in a position to say, we need to be put on check. He believes that he is that he's not innocent, that he's just as guilty for the disasters all the other villains, that he's no better than the bad guys if he's not put on check, that he doesn't have boundaries, which puts him in odds with Cap as well, because Cap is no longer following the rules of the government. He is doing the right thing because it's the only thing that he knows best. Tony sees it in a much more different way, in a more complicated way of, yeah, rules are the ones that makes us better human beings, better heroes. And if we don't obey these rules, they're gonna take us down no matter what. And that's the mentality that Tony goes through. He's still under the assumption of a bad guy pulling the strings, but he is still under the belief that, yeah, things are not going to get better if we're not having rules. And yes, it creates opposition with Steve, and that's something that really makes us understand Tony's side. Unlike the comics in which he was acting very douchey in the comics, Tony Stark was not it was acting very villain-like in this version. Because we like to see Tony and his journey of being a better hero, we see that the conflict that is going inside of him. And that is something that I really enjoyed from this performance. Robert Downey Jr. brings not only the charm of Iron Man, but also the seriousness of being Tony Stark and the seriousness of his actions as this hero. Now let's talk about the main character, Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. So, after all this, after the events of Sokovia, after the mission failed, and after losing a lot of people's lives, and learning about his best friend still on the run, and losing to Peggy Carter, the love of his life, through illness and old age, it puts Steve in a position of what is the best thing to do, what is the right thing to do. And when Bucky is framed for murder, when he's framed for being a terrorist, it puts him in a position to find out what is going on, who's the person responsible. He doesn't think too much about, okay, if I do this, I know the consequences, but I'm going to do so anyway because I'm still believing in my best friend. And that is something that we see Steve go through. This is not just the journey of him saving his best friend, it's the moral ground that he has to stand for, because he grew up in the 40s. He grew up in World War II. He understands that the enemy is people who are hurting others, no matter what. And he understands that, yeah, Bucky might be dangerous, but he also believes that he's a good person. And he will fight through thick and thin to prove that he's innocent or to put him away from the government's clutches. And that is something that we like to see. We like to see Steve's journey trying to save his best friend, putting his moral ground, and just say, no, he's not the bad guy. Bucky's not the bad guy. This doctor, this able man, this guy called Simo is the bad guy. And I'm going to stop him from pulling an evil scheme. And that is the mentality that Steve goes through. Of course, it has consequences when he finds out something about Bucky, about what he did in the past, and it makes him put in a position that puts him in the opposite side with Tony. And that is the thing that he struggles the most. How he maintains his best friend's life, but also realizing that he's probably destroying the one that he has, not only with Tony, but with the other Avengers. And that is something beautiful to see. Now let's talk about production design and effects. Joe and Anthony Russo, when they made Captain America the Winter Soldier, they're relying a little bit more on action, less than effects and, big CG action. In here, it's good to see that they still incorporate a lot of CG action to do the amazing action and fight scenes that we all love to see. But also it's good to see that there is more practical effects, that there are more real shots about people chasing each other, about moral conflicts, the production design of the suits, the action and the places are still up to standard. It still looks very futuristic for the MCU, of course, very standard, but it's also good to see that there are more practical locations, more actual scenes, and they actually have great cinematography, great shots about people chasing each other. And that is the one thing that enhances more the action. The action sequences, it's a work of art. I can label my favorite ones here from the fighting Praga against Crossbones, the chasing between Black Panther, Bucky, and War Machine and Steve, the fight scene with the Winter Soldier inside the Germany prison. With all the heroes trying to stop Bucky from doing more harm, Steve and Bucky fighting Iron Man in Siberia, and of course, everybody's favorite airport fight scene. I mean, this is the one that many people say is the best heroes versus heroes action that we have ever seen thus far. It really makes Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice look bad by comparison. I know I'm crapping on Zack Snyder in this version, but this one, not only do we see clear who is doing more harm, but we also see that there's a real location to see our heroes in an actual place fighting each other to see which ones is better or which ones can stop the other. It's good to see how they use and incorporate each hero's type of power. From Iron Man's suit to the stamina and strength of Steve Rogers as Captain America, Falcon and War Machine fighting it through the air, Clint and Natasha having a confrontation as well. They still respect each other and love each other as brother and sister, but still, Wanda's use of her powers against Vision, of course, Black Panther facing against Bucky. This is just beautiful to see. And more importantly than that, it brings us to something that obviously is not very important to the assessment of this review, but is one of the reasons why I love this movie and what I think is the best part of this entire film. And that is, of course, the appearance of Tom Holland as Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Now, the Spider-Man fan in me obviously wants to talk about it, but of course, the critic one in me also wants to say he's not the focus, of course. Why would it be your focus in this review? But here's the thing. Now that we're hitting the 10-year anniversary of Tom Holland playing this character for a decade, I mean, this guy went from being in this movie as one of the few members of Tony's team to fight Cap's team through be an incredible character. I mean, it's hard to explain, but Tom Holland did something very impressive as Spider-Man. We all know that we all love Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. He is my number one hero. He is an inspiration. The one hero that I will put above any other. I already said that he's one of the greatest. And in fact, I'm going to talk about Tom Holland as Spider-Man when Brand New Day comes out. I'm going to do a review about it because there's a reason I enjoy this character so much. But of course, we all are aware that there were many versions of Spider-Man over the years. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and this is something I need to bring up. In the leads to Captain America Civil War being released to the theaters, we all saw that The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was very bad. It did bad with critics and with the audience. Sony got hacked by North Korea and it got things complicated. But it also created something, an opportunity for Sony to make a deal with Disney to bring Spider-Man into their movies, to create this wonderful deal that has been maintained for many years about bringing Spider-Man to the MCU, giving his own movies, and create a new version of it. So this was the most recent recasting of the character, of course. But one of the things that I appreciated from Tom Holland's performance here is 20 minutes. 20 minutes it took to convince us why he was great, not only as Spider-Man, but also as Peter Parker. His introduction when Tony goes to his apartment and visits Peter and Aunt May. By the way, Aunt May is played by Marissa Tomei. That was an interesting casting choice, but also one that I really enjoy, and it was one of my favorite versions of Aunt May thus far. But yeah, it is also important to note that not only had to be convincing as the awkward, very socially handicapped version of Peter Parker struggling to be around people, but also have the best chemistry with Tony Stark about talking about technology, about their respective backgrounds, but also had to be convincing as the charming, charismatic, and very joke like a superhero that is Spider Man. Fighting alongside Tony against the other heroes, fighting against Bucky and Falcon, be giving jokes and his own dialogue, finding Cap, finding the others, giving his own perspective, to feel his confidence as a superhero is what I enjoy for this movie very, very much. And I know a lot of people say, well, he was just used to sell this picture more. Like, obviously, a lot of people like this film because his appearance. But it's not just that, it's the extra layer that adds to it. We all wanted Spider-Man to be in the MCU for so long, and now that he appeared, it brought the character to a different light. He's still naive, but he's still very confident and very loyal and very friendly. He's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man after all. And Tom Holland's performance here, it took 20 minutes to convince us that not only he could be Peter Parker, but also Spider-Man as well. And that, in my opinion, excelled all my expectations. In my opinion, this is my favorite version of Spider-Man thus far. I love Toby and Andrew to death. There is no things that I could say that will make me feel less, make me love them less when they play those characters. But yeah, Tom Holland was the one that really, really hit the nail in the hat and really did it very, very good job. And this is the one reason why he has been maintaining this version of the character for many years. And now the brand new day is going to come out is one of the reasons I'm looking forward to see. And that's all in part to Tom Holland's performance. So yeah, I enjoyed it very much. Now let's tackle a subject that I wanted to talk about, and that is asking the question, is this movie better than the comic book? A lot of people seem to not enjoy Captain America Civil War because they don't believe that it's as massive as the comic. You see, the comic involved a lot of heroes in their own factions, in their own sides. Like some of them are pro Tony Stark and others are pro Captain America. And it involved many heroes from New York, around the world, and some of the mutants, which ironically the X-Men were basically a side, to so to speak. How can I say this? They were not as involved, except I think Wolverine, and he was joining Cap's side. But yeah, the comic book was massive in scale. There were more higher body counts and heroes dying, and some of them in prison. It also involved the recruitment of some of the villains to capture some of those rogue heroes. And a lot of people feel like it was massive, it was big, it was confrontational, and it was larger. But here's the question that I want to ask you. Do you think larger means, like quality? Like the quantity does outweigh the quality of the comic book? Is it outweigh the quality of the media? In my opinion, and I've seen other reviews about it, some praise Civil War, but others have also had their problems with the comic book as well. You see, it turned the heroes into villains, whether it was from Captain American's side to Tony Stark's side, it didn't matter. It was basically showing like the dark aspects of the superheroes, which I'm sure a lot of people are used to that. They've seen shows like The Boys, Invincible, and others that tackle those subject matters. But in my opinion, when it comes to Marvel and DC, they're always about superheroes doing the right things. Others have deconstructed the mentality towards heroes fighting heroes as mute because they are all have something in common. They all want what's best for people. They are looking for the greater good for humanity. But others, like villains, don't care about that. And that's why we need heroes from Marvel and DC stopping bad guys rather than to fighting each other. It's hard to say, but in my opinion, I prefer the movie instead of the comic book because if you read the comic book, yes, there's a lot of problems in it. There's a lot of body counts and character assassinations, if you want to call it. And overall, it felt more quippy than usual. And while it has more quippiness in Captain America Civil War, I feel that they took the situation and the story more serious than in the comic. At least that's my opinion. But I do still appreciate the comic for what it brought to us. The big moments of seeing our heroes fighting each other, the moral dilemmas about the consequences of superhero action when they're not using their powers well or just causing damage inadvertently, of course. And yeah, there's a lot of things that you can appreciate that. But I do appreciate Civil War in the movies as being a little bit smaller, but it still feel personal. And at the end of the day, we appreciate that more than any larger special effect, more than any number of superheroes that can show up. It's still cool, but you also need personal stories that connects us to those heroes. Like if you do your job right, then you can make us care for the heroes, whether it was in Iron Man's side or Captain America's side. And honestly, I appreciated that more than any. And yeah, I do agree that the comic book is also politically charged and is no small feat due to the events of 9/11. But even with that, I will appreciate the comic for what it brought to us. But I will say that the movie did it a lot better. That's in my opinion, at least. If you disagree and you feel like the comic book was better, all the power to you. It's just that that movie was more personal to me. It had more a connection between which side you're on and seeing both sides. It allowed me to see the pros and cons of registering to the government and seeing the pros and cons, but also see also the other pros and cons of shunning aside the government or doing your own things. It's good to be heroes for the nature of doing good is right. But sometimes, yeah, we also need rules, we need regulations because sometimes you need to draw the line. And that's what I appreciate about this movie. And sure, it doesn't end with our heroes together, which I appreciate that, and I appreciate that it has consequences for the other movies. But I enjoyed it immensely, and yeah, I cannot recommend it enough. So my whole conclusion with Captain America: Civil War. Not only do I feel like it's one of the best installments in Captain America's trilogy, but I also feel like it's one of the best MCU movies that I've seen so far. The characters are relatable, the story is interesting, the villain is very maniacal, but at the same time relatable to us as well. The cameos are great, the heroes fighting heroes is awesome, and yeah, it's an overall good time, and it makes you appreciate how Marvel really wanted to push the boundaries of superheroes. And yeah, I know a lot of people say Marvel is doing the same thing over and over again, but if you look at it from my perspective, if you look at it for what DC was doing at that time, if you look at it from what many movies were trying to do at that time, I'm glad that Marvel was it was still in the fight, still in the film industry, doing a lot of good things and a lot of imaginative stories and worlds. And I always will appreciate that. No matter what the movie is, no matter how bad or worse it gets, I will always be a Marvel fan. And movies like Captain America Civil War are the argument to that, are one of the reasons why I love Marvel. The MCU is my first love. I'm sorry. So, yeah, I really recommend you see Captain America Civil War. If you haven't done it yet, check it out. You might find some things about it that you might appreciate. So yeah, that's my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like and subscribe like as always. And if you want more notifications, let me know by subscribing to this channel. So next week, no Marvel media for now, but I'm going to go back to Itshenryart afterwards. So until then, I'm been Enrique, and I'll see you next time. Peace.